Few rulers in history have wielded power with such merciless precision as Tamerlane. His conquests were defined by calculated acts of extreme violence that went far beyond the battlefield. The punishments he imposed on his enemies were designed to obliterate opposition through sheer terror, reshaping entire regions with a brutality that defies modern comprehension. One of the most horrifying and infamous punishments carried out by Tamerlane was the construction of towering pyramids made from the skulls of his enemies. After massacres, he ordered the collection of the remains of those killed, particularly the skulls, which were then stacked into large macabre monuments. These skull pyramids served as terrifying symbols of his absolute power and the fate awaiting those who opposed him. Historical accounts describe how, following major battles and sieges, thousands of skulls were assembled into massive pyramids visible from great distances. For instance, after the capture of Isfahan and other key cities, Tamerlane's forces built such pyramids to permanently mark the conquest. These structures were not only a display of conquest, but a psychological weapon intended to instill deep fear in other cities and populations. The skull pyramids functioned as gruesome warnings. They communicated a message beyond words. Resistance meant death and dishonor on an unprecedented scale. The lasting visual impact of these monuments amplified Tamerlane's reputation as a ruthless conqueror who would go to any lengths to secure submission. Tamerlane, known for his ruthless military campaigns, frequently employed mass executions as a method to subdue conquered populations. After the capture of a city, he often ordered the systematic slaughter of tens of thousands of prisoners, civilians, and soldiers alike. These executions were not merely acts of revenge, but calculated strategies to instill terror and prevent future resistance. One of the most notorious examples occurred during the sack of Isfahan in 1387. After a prolonged siege, Tamerlane's forces overwhelmed the city, and in response, he ordered the massacre of an estimated 70,000 inhabitants. Men, women, and children were killed indiscriminately, demonstrating the brutal extent of his reprisals. This act was intended to send a clear message to other cities. Resistance would be met with overwhelming and merciless force. Such mass executions were not isolated incidents, but a recurring feature of Tamerlane's conquests across Central Asia, Persia, and the Middle East. They were part of a broader policy to weaken enemy morale, reduce the possibility of rebellion, and consolidate his power through fear. Tamerlane's campaigns were marked not only by mass killings, but also by deliberate acts of mutilation and torture designed to instill terror and break the will of his enemies. These punishments were systematically applied to captives, soldiers, and even civilians who resisted or were deemed threats. Common forms of mutilation included the blinding of prisoners, cutting off noses, ears, or tongues, and amputating limbs. These acts served both to punish individuals and to send a broader message to enemy populations that defiance would result in permanent suffering and humiliation. Tamerlane also employed severe torture methods to extract information or as retribution. These methods varied, but were always intended to maximize pain and fear. The use of such brutal punishments functioned as psychological warfare, discouraging rebellion and encouraging swift surrender from opposing forces. The scale and severity of these acts contributed significantly to Tamerlane's terrifying reputation. They were integral to his military strategy, reinforcing his dominance through fear and brutality. Tamerlane's conquests were often followed by large-scale enslavement and forced relocations of entire populations. After subjugating a region, he systematically captured skilled artisans, craftsmen, laborers, and common people, transporting them to his empire's core territories. This policy served multiple strategic purposes. It deprived conquered regions of valuable human resources, enriched his own domains, and minimized the risk of rebellion by dispersing and weakening enemy communities. Mass deportations involved forcibly moving tens of thousands of people, sometimes hundreds of miles away from their homelands. Families were separated, and entire cities were emptied of their inhabitants, who were then enslaved or pressed into labor. These relocated populations contributed to construction projects, military needs, and the development of Tamerlane's capital, Samarkand. Enslavement was brutal and dehumanizing. Captives were sold into slavery or conscripted into hard labor, often under harsh conditions. This practice was not limited to prisoners of war, but extended to civilians, including women and children. By implementing these widespread deportations and enslavements, Tamerlane ensured long-term control over his empire while simultaneously devastating the social and economic fabric of conquered regions. The fear of such fate was a powerful deterrent against resistance. Tamerlane's military strategy was not limited to battlefield victories. It extended to the deliberate and systematic destruction of cities that resisted his authority. His approach to conquest often involved the complete razing of urban centers, including the burning of homes, marketplaces, religious buildings, and vital infrastructure. This scorched earth policy was designed to punish defiance and to eliminate any possibility of the city's rapid recovery or future rebellion. When a city refused to surrender or resisted his forces, Tamerlane responded with extreme brutality. After a successful siege, his armies would loot and burn buildings indiscriminately, destroying everything in their path. The fires often consumed entire neighborhoods, leaving the cityscape charred and unrecognizable. Beyond physical destruction, agricultural fields surrounding cities were burned or ruined, irrigation canals were destroyed, and water supplies were cut off, ensuring the inhabitants could neither survive nor rebuild easily. One notable example of this destruction occurred after the capture of the city of Herat. Following a prolonged siege, Tamerlane ordered the demolition of the city's defenses and the burning of its residential districts. The once thriving city was left in ruins, its economy shattered, and its population decimated. The effects of this devastation lasted for decades, with Herat struggling to regain its former prominence well after Tamerlane's reign. This method of total destruction was a calculated tactic. By obliterating key cities, Tamerlane removed strategic and economic centers from enemy control, disrupted regional governance, and inflicted long-lasting damage to the infrastructure and morale of the defeated peoples. The survivors of these cities were often left homeless and destitute, forced to flee or face starvation in the aftermath of the devastation. The terror of such wholesale destruction was widespread, serving as a grim warning to other cities and regions. News of burned cities spread quickly, frequently prompting other rulers and populations to surrender preemptively to avoid facing a similar fate. This strategy of destruction reinforced Tamerlane's dominance through fear and demonstrated the high cost of resistance. The burning and destruction of cities were central components of Tamerlane's ruthless campaign to consolidate power. These acts not only eliminated immediate opposition, but also crippled enemy regions for generations, ensuring his control and influence extended far beyond the battlefield. Tamerlane's reputation as one of history's most ruthless conquerors was built on the extreme brutality he inflicted upon his enemies. His campaigns were characterized by a deliberate and systematic use of terror tactics designed to crush resistance swiftly and ensure total domination over vast territories. From the outset of his military conquests, Tamerlane employed violence on an unprecedented scale. His forces showed little mercy to those who opposed him. Soldiers, civilians, and entire cities suffered equally. This brutality was both physical and psychological, aimed at breaking the enemy's spirit and preventing future uprisings. Mass executions followed the capture of rebellious cities, often involving tens of thousands of victims. Entire populations could be massacred as a form of collective punishment. In addition to outright killing, Tamerlane's armies inflicted horrifying mutilations such as blinding prisoners, severing limbs, and other forms of torture. These acts were intended to serve as grim examples to discourage dissent. Tamerlane also engaged in the mass deportation and enslavement of conquered peoples, forcibly relocating skilled craftsmen, laborers, and entire communities to serve his empire's needs. This policy devastated the social and economic structures of the defeated regions, weakening their ability to resist in the future. Moreover, Tamerlane was infamous for erecting pyramids made of the skulls of his victims, a gruesome symbol of his power and a psychological weapon to terrorize any who might challenge him. He often ordered the destruction and burning of cities, leaving ruins as a permanent reminder of his conquest. This calculated brutality was not merely wanton cruelty, but a strategic tool. By instilling deep fear, Tamerlane ensured that many cities surrendered without a fight, minimizing prolonged warfare while maximizing his control. His methods earned him a legacy both feared and reviled, a conqueror whose brutality was as formidable as his military genius. The sheer scale and severity of his actions against enemies remain a stark example of the extremes of conquest in human history.